Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining us on this beautiful Sunday morning. Great to see you all today. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. We are studying together, as is our custom, on Sunday morning, the previous Perashah that we finished last week, and therefore we are studying today together Perashat Bo. And it's very interesting because our Perashah actually is Yetziat Mitzrayim. It deals with the exodus from Egypt. And so something that we find very interesting in the Seder, which is the night that we relive the exodus from Mitzrayim, and that is one of the highlights of the Seder is the Arba'a Banim, the four sons that are with us at the Seder, or the four children. We know that at every Seder table, we say, Keneged Arba'a Banim Debera Torah. There are four different types of children that our Torah spoke about or spoke corresponding to. And they are the Hacham, the Rasha, the Tam, and She'eno Yodea Lish'ol. Right? These are our four children. And we wonder, where did the Haggadah get this from? That these are the four types of children that we have with us at the Seder. And the answer is, if we look closely in the Torah, it says four different times, say to your children. Four different times. And the way the Torah says it, we could imply what kind of child it's talking about. So for example, one child asks a very simple question. Ma zot. What is this? That's not an intellectual question. That's not a very deep question. He just notices that we're doing matzah, maror, seder, pesach. So he says, what is this? So we say, okay, this child must be a tam, a simple child. He's not such a bright person, not so intelligent. That is the first child, right? There is another child that doesn't even ask the question. The Torah says, you tell him. So we say, oh, that's a child that doesn't even know how to ask. That's She'eno Yodea Lish'ol. That's the second child. Then there are the last two sons or children. Really, they're the first two. And if we look closely at their questions, and I were to ask you to label or identify these children, you would have a very hard time differentiating the two. So for example, the first child is found in this week's Perashah. And the Pasuk reads in our Perashah, Perashat Bo, Perashat Bo, Vehaya ki yomru alechem benechem, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. And it will be that your child one day may ask you, what is this avodah, what is this service that we are doing? What is this service that you're doing? Well, the Torah says you should give him the following answer, and it gives us a whole pasuk of how we should respond to this child. Well, there is another child. He's mentioned all the way in Devarim, chapter 6, pasuk 20. Let me read to you the question of this child, and I want you to hear please try to hear if you discern a difference. Ki yish'alecha bincha mahar lemor. One day, tomorrow, in the future, your child will ask you, Ma ha'edut va'hukim va'mishpatim. What are these laws, statutes, rules? Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. That our God is commanding you. Well, the Torah says you should tell your son, we were servants to Paro and Mitzrayim. So here we have two questions that if we put them side by side, we'll have a very hard time differentiating between them. Again, the first question is, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. 4 words. What is this avodah that you're doing? The next question, Ma ha'edut va'hukim va'mishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. And again, to our eyes, they're very similar questions. But to the eyes of somebody who is very talented, to the eyes of our rabbis, these were very different children. And our rabbis tell us that the first child mentioned in our Perashah, in Perashat Bo, that's the Rasha, that is the wicked child. The next question is the She'elat Hacham, that's the question of the wise person. And we wonder and we scratch our heads and we say, 1 second, what exactly was the difference? I don't understand. They both asked the same exact question. One of them, you're labeling a Hacham, a wise child. The other one, you're labeling a Rasha. And we ask ourselves, why? This is something that needs to be studied. And there are many answers to this question. What is the difference between, why do we call one child and we assume from his question? Meaning, my question is today, where in the question of the Rasha did the rabbis find room to criticize him and to label him such a child who was wicked? Just because he's asking, where in the question did they see it? So, I know what you're going to tell me. You say, Rabbi, the Haggadah gives us the answer. The Haggadah itself says, Lachem, the Rasha's question, if we look closely, Maha avodah, 4 words, Maha avodah hazot, lachem. What is this avodah for you? Lachem, he is excluding himself from the Jewish community. He is saying the question for you guys. Well, this is the service for you guys and not me. And this is what the Haggadah says. The Haggadah makes this inference. The Haggadah implies, Lachem, he's trying to exclude himself from the community. And that's why we label him a Rasha. Now that would be a very good answer. The only problem with that answer is that if we go to the next son, the Hacham, we find the same exact exclusion. He excludes himself from the community and he says, Maha edut ve'haokim ve'mishpatim, what are all of these laws and statutes? Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. What are all of these laws that God is commanding you? He doesn't say otanu, he doesn't say us. He also, the Hacham also excludes himself. So back to the question, why are we picking on the Rasha? Why are we labeling him Rasha? What is the difference between him and the wise son? And the answer that our rabbis give, Hacham Ovadia Yosef has a very beautiful piece in his commentary on the Haggadah Shel Pesach, and it's an amazing commentary if you read Hebrew. And he explains that there are 2 types of questions. Question number 1 is a question that deserves an answer. It's a question of curiosity. One wants to hear the answer because they are trying to find out the truth about a certain matter. That is question number 1. Then there's a different type of question, but it's not really a question. It's phrased like a question, but the truth is it's an excuse disguised in a question. So one person wants to really know the truth and they're asking to know. Another person is asking, but they don't really want to know. They're asking because they're looking to mock. They're looking to ridicule. They're looking to excuse themselves of the obligation of they're trying to get out of it. You know, there's an amazing story told about, I believe it's Rav Chaim Volozhiner, that one of his Talmidim went out and he became part of the secular community, unfortunately. Growing up in yeshiva, but he left yeshiva to join the secular community. And many years later, he came back after being, losing all of his religious values. And he comes back to his rabbi. He says, Rabbi Rav Chaim, I don't mind sitting here and coming back to the dat, to the religion, to the faith. I'll come back to God and to Judaism. But I got a few questions, Rabbi, that I need answered. And the rabbi smiled and he says to his students, I will answer all of your questions. I just want to ask you one question first, and that is, did you have these questions before you left, or did you have these questions after you left? Did you have these questions before you fell off the path or after? And the student got a little bit embarrassed and he admitted, he said, Rabbi, I have these questions from more recently. And the rabbi said, if that's the case, I cannot help you, my dear child, my dear student, because you don't have any questions. Your questions are not real questions. Your questions are excuses. You are trying to justify the path that you have chosen, and therefore you have to ease your conscience. And to do so, you have formulated many, many questions around your life. And what Rav Chaim was teaching his student, and what he is teaching us, is that it's okay to have questions. Quite the contrary, in Judaism, we recommend questions. We welcome questions. Matter of fact, on the Seder night, the Halakha gives us the formula that we must ask questions. And the story has to be in a question-answer format. And if there is no one to ask, if the children don't ask, then guess what? We should ask for them. Even if one is alone, one has to ask. We're not embarrassed of questions. We're not afraid of questions. By the way, unfortunately, not many people accept this fact. Even within the religious circles, there are many times that a person will ask a question and the teacher will get very flustered, or they'll get nervous because they don't have an answer to the question. And instead of validating the question, they'll say to the students, and I was on the phone a few weeks ago with somebody, they told me a situation that they grew up and the teacher, they asked a certain question in class and the Mora got very afraid that she didn't have an answer to the question. And so she told the girl, she started labeling her, you atheist, you this, you that, for asking questions. How dare you? You don't accept the words of our rabbis. You don't accept the teachings, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And until today, this lady is much older now, many years later, and she's still scarred. She still remembers how the teacher, and this is not the Jewish way, by the way. We are not afraid of questions. We welcome them. We are more than happy to entertain as many questions as possible. But, and here is the capital B-U-T. They must be questions. Questions, we have no problem. We're not afraid of them. And if we don't know the answer, then we'll look, we'll search. Maybe we'll find it somewhere. But it has to be a question. And if it's not a question, if it is just an excuse, if it's meant to ridicule and to mock halacha, that in Judaism we don't have tolerance for. And therefore our rabbis tell us, this is the difference in attitude between son number 1 and son number 2. The first son, we labeled him a Rasha. In the Torah, in this week's Parasha, the question, Vehaya ki yomeru alechem, we label him a Rasha. The second son, all the way in Devarim, we label him a Hacham. We asked why. The difference is, there is a very big difference in attitude if someone is coming and asking a question, or if they're coming with a statement, or they're coming to mock, or to be a scoffer, or a letz, or to ridicule. There are two different ways that they will approach. I'll give you an example. If there is a student in class that has a question, they will raise their hand and they will say, Rabbi, I have a question on what you just said. And they will ask their question, and it will be asked in a very respectful tone. It will be asked in a manner that we can realize that they are interested in an answer. They're open-minded, and they have the humility to say, you know what, I don't understand, and could you please explain it? Right? The attitude is one who wants to know, and they will follow. But the other one, the other type of kid who's not really interested in asking, right? The rabbi says a certain halakha that rubs the kid the wrong way because he doesn't keep this halakha. So he'll raise his hand and he'll ask a question, but you could tell in his tone that he's not really asking. You could tell he's very loud. He's looking to ridicule. He's looking to mock. He's trying to get out of it. He's trying to make a joke of the halakha, of the Torah, of the mitzvot. And he is using this again as an excuse to follow his own lifestyle. The child who wants to know, the child who is really curious, he will do and he will observe, even if the question remains unresolved. He will be able to say, you know what? I don't like the answer that the rabbi gave, but I'm going to keep observing, I'm going to keep listening, I'm going to keep doing until I find the right answer. Because guess what? Life is always about searching, and the more we learn, the more we know. So maybe this person couldn't satisfy my question, but a different rabbi will. And so such a person who's really interested in the answer will keep searching for the answer. The person who's not interested in an answer, he just wants to make a statement to, again, I did my part, I excuse myself because what you said is obviously ridiculous, and I proved that it's ridiculous because I asked a very strong question. They will not continue to search afterwards. And that is a very easy way to, again, identify what kind of child we have in front of us. every morning there is a halakha that we are supposed to put tefillin. We put tefillin on the arm and we put tefillin on the rosh, tefillin on the head. And the halakha says that it's very important to make sure the tefillin goes on the hand first. And only then do we put the tefillin on the head, on the rosh. Not only that, but we know that there is a halakha called ein ma'avirin al mitzvot. We're not allowed to pass over mitzvot. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm reaching in my bag for my talit, to put my talit on, and by mistake I touch the tefillin first. So Yakut Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yosef writes, since you touch the tefillin, you must put it first. Put the tefillin, and afterwards you put the talit. But Rabbi, it's backwards. You're right, it's backwards, but in ma'avirim, we're not allowed to skip mitzvot. You touch the tefillin, you cannot just put it on the side and leave it alone. Okay? This halakha has many ramifications. But what would be the case if by mistake, similar situation, the person touched the tefillin of the head before touching the tefillin of the hand? Should he put the head first? Here the halakha says no. The hand must always come first. And it's based on a pasuk. And our rabbis are trying to give us a very important message with this halakha. Because the tefillin on the hand represents action. Deeds. Mitzvot. The tefillin on the head represents thought, knowledge, understanding. And our rabbis say that the order always has to be first do, first we perform, first we observe, first we follow, and only then do we try to understand. But our understanding should never be a result of whether or not we observe the commandments. Or rather, our observance should never be contingent upon our understanding. Our understanding is second to our performance. And therefore, when the Jewish people got to Har Sinai, what did they say? They said, first na'aseh, and then v'nishma. First we will do, and only then will we nishma. What does nishma mean? Nishma means to listen. Listen to what? Listen to the commandments? Of course not. They cannot do it without first knowing what the commandment is. Rather, nishma means to understand what the commandment, the reason of the commandment, the why. First we will do, and only then will we try to understand the why in the mitzvot. But at the end of the day, even if our intelligence is lacking, even if our comprehension and our understanding is not there, and the mitzvah makes no sense, I will still perform the mitzvot to the best of my ability, because I realize that I am humble enough to be able to say, I don't understand. But there must be a reason. God's much smarter than me. God has a reason. And again, that requires a lot of anava, a lot of humility. In the morning we say at the end of the prayers, En Kelohenu, En Kadonenu. There's no one like our God. There's no one like our King. Then we continue and we say, Mi Kelohenu. Who is like our God? Who is like our King? And if one is paying attention, seemingly the order is reversed. First we're saying there's no one like God. And then we ask, who is like God? Shouldn't it be opposite? First we should ask, Mi Kelohenu, who is like our God? And then we should say, oh, good question. Answer, there is no one like our God. But that's not the order. Because again, says the Hatam Sofer, En Kelohenu. First, we affirm, we say very clearly and loudly, there is no one like our God. We put the tefillin on the arm and we say, this is the fact. This is the truth. And now we'll ask, we should ask, we must ask, halakha requires us to understand and to do mitzvot, not out of habit or out of rote, but to do it with feeling, to do it with understanding and appreciation of the mitzvah. And so ask away. But to remember that I should ask a question. I shouldn't ask a statement. That is a very big, important difference. And with this, we come back to the question of the Hacham. The Hacham and the Rasha, seemingly, we ask, their questions are very similar. But if we analyze closely, we will see that they have very different questions. The Rasha says, Vehaya, look how the Torah introduces his question. And it will be one day, Ki yomeru alechem benechem. What does yomeru mean? Yomar is to say. It will be that one day your children will say to you, he's not asking you, he's saying it. That's not a question. Such a child, such a question, that's a disrespectful question. That's a statement that is mocking. That's why the Torah realizes, our rabbis realized, he must be a Rasha if that's his question. The other child, he's saying, Ki yish alecha. You could tell from his question that he is really asking a question as opposed to making an excuse for his decisions in life. And if you may ask, you may say, well, Rabbi, how could you tell that the first child is really saying? Give him the benefit of the doubt. Who told you he's saying? Maybe he's asking, maybe he really wants to know. And the answer is because, again, there is a very big difference if someone is asking or saying. If it's a question, it will be done in a polite way, in a respectful way. It will be done in private. After class, Rabbi, could I speak to you? I didn't understand this so well. Could I ask you afterwards? That's respectful. That's inquisitive. The other child who's coming to mock, if you're coming to mock, usually it's going to be done with a whole entourage of kids behind him. He's coming in a group. He's doing it in front of the whole class. Rabbi, really? This is what you, right? It's done in public. And if again we look closely at the Rasha, is that one thing that we find by his question or his statement that's not found by any of the other children, and that is the language of plurality. By the Rasha, he is the only one that says, Ve'haya ki yomeru alechem. It will be when your children will tell you plural. It doesn't say Ve'haya ki yomar. By all the other three children, it's singular. Ki yish alecha bincha. When your child will ask, singular. Vehigata lebincha. Tell your child, singular. These are all singular. Only one of the four children is plural, and that is the Rasha. Because again, he's looking to make fun of, he's looking to carry as many people as possible with him away from the classroom, away from the study hall. He's looking to take them all to his party, to his house, to wherever he wants. It will be done in public, it will be done to mock. And therefore the Torah says, that's not a question. He doesn't really want to know. And therefore, don't waste your time answering him. It's going to go in one ear, out the other. And therefore, you know what the Torah, the Haggadah says? Ve'ata hakeh et shinav. Knock out his teeth. Which is the Torah's way of which is the rabbi's way of saying, to give him some type of answer that has some wit involved. But don't bother answering his exact question, because his question, he's not going to listen to the answer. Now, what's very interesting is that the Torah itself tells us what to answer that child. In our parasha, the wicked son's question is, Ve'amarta elav. You should tell him. And the pasuk says what we should tell this son. Ve'amarta elav, Ve'amartem, Zevach Pesach hu laHashem. You shall respond and say that it's a sacrifice of Pesach for God, because he passed over our houses in Egypt when he destroyed Mitzrayim. And here, seemingly, the Torah is giving us an answer to the question of the Rasha. But if we pay close attention, we will realize that the Torah is not giving us an answer to his question. Because the Torah does not say, Va'amartem elav. Again, by the other three children, the Torah says, tell him. Say to him. Here, the Torah leaves out to him, because we're not responding to him. So who are we responding to? Who are we responding to if it's not to the child? And the answer is, we are responding to ourselves. We are talking to each other. Because there is another problem. When a question is asked to ridicule, maybe we're not going to be able to answer the Rasha, the child who's asking the question, because he's not looking for an answer. But there is another danger, and that is that maybe we ourselves will become persuaded for the bad. Maybe the other kids in the classroom. You know, this is something that I experience sometimes as a teacher. A child will ask a question, and I know that they're not interested in the answer. But I give an answer anyways. Not for him. Because maybe he's not listening. He checked out. He just asked this question to show that he knows, and he left. He left, his head's gone already. But now there are 20 other kids in the class that this kid threw doubt into their heads. My own mind, this kid threw doubt, and therefore we have to make sure to answer, but not him. We're answering for ourselves to make sure that we don't get persuaded by his question. You know, Rabbi Twersky brings a beautiful story. There was once a man that was carrying a sign, "Repent, ye sinners." And one man saw him walking around with a sign, "Repent, repent." He goes over and says, "I don't understand. Do you really think that your sign's going to make people repent?" And the man smiles and he responds, "Maybe it won't make them repent, but at least it'll help me not to become like them." Meaning in life, when there are scoffers, when there are people that are making fun, we cannot just remain passive. There needs to be a certain amount of activism involved to make sure that we remain where we are. And that is what the Torah is reminding us. Make sure you answer, not him. Don't answer him. He doesn't want to hear an answer. Va'amartem, say to yourselves, say to each other. Wait 1 second, guys. We have to remind ourselves, this is important. Why are we doing this? Zevach Pesach, to reinforce our own faith so that it should not waver because of his question. And if that's the case, we could answer one more final diuk in our pasuk of the Hacham and the Rasha. And that is, the Rasha, if we look closely at his question, it says, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. The Rasha, the wicked child, is saying, what is this service hazot? What is zot? Zot is this. Zot means I'm pointing. The kid, when is the Rasha asking his question? He's asking his question right here, right now, on the Seder table. He's saying, Dad, Mom, teacher, explain this to me right now. And if you don't, I'm not interested. I ain't gonna eat any matzah unless you make sense of this for me. That is the question of the Rasha. Whereas the child who is a Hacham, the next pasuk that we are comparing it to today, which is all the way in Devarim chapter 6, again, chapter 6, pasuk 20. Ki yish'alcha bincha, when your child will ask you, but when does he ask his question? He doesn't ask it now on the Seder table. He's ready to do it. He's ready to do it even though he doesn't understand it. He puts the tefillin on the yad before the tefillin on the rosh. When does this question come? Ki yish'alcha bincha mahar. Tomorrow. His question comes on the morrow. His question comes tomorrow. He is willing to do. He's willing to observe even though it doesn't make sense to him. Tomorrow, Rabbi, can we sit down? You know, yesterday you said something in class that didn't make sense. That was very bothersome. I would like to understand. That's a respectful question. That's a question that we will sit down and we will answer it. And we realize from the question that such a child must be a Hacham. So these are some differences between the again, at the Seder, we're reading it very quickly. Maybe we don't pay a lot of attention to it. We just say, one's wise, one's wicked, one is simple, and we quickly. But 1 second, where in the question did the rabbis see that this child was wicked? Where did they realize to label the other one a wise son? And the answer, based on today's class, is beautifully, because the first child, again, the first child is not asking a question. There are two types of question. One is a question, but one is more of an excuse. And the attitude will be very different. If it's a question, then we'll ask, and our observance won't be contingent upon our understanding, and therefore, maybe we'll ask tomorrow. As well, we will ask respectfully, we will ask privately. We will ask not with the whole class listening. But when it's more of an excuse, when it's to mock and to ridicule, when it's to scoff, over there to be a letz, our rabbis point out, such an attitude, they're not really asking, they are saying, Vehaya ki yomeru. Not only are they saying they want to know now, and if you don't make sense of it now, I'm not doing it. And finally, the third thing is that they want to know, and they want all their friends to listen in, because the goal at the end of the day is not really to understand. The goal is to ridicule and to make fun. And these are some thoughts reminding us how important it is to have questions, but to make sure that we are asking the right questions, and we are asking questions that are really questions, not questions that are statements or questions that are excuses. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.